Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Brockwell Park Community Greenhouses Gardeners Question Time for Saturday, the 6th of June. Welcome, everybody who is watching live, and hello to everyone on YouTube. People that watch the very first episode of Gardeners Question Time that we ever run will recognize Superman, Mexican Day of the Dead, Jesus, who is our new cameo as I put up pictures in my new flat. We have a couple of questions to get onto, and also I've got a special guest that's joining us today who we will speak to in a moment. Just a brief announcement for some greenhouse business before we get started. So next Sunday, which is the 13th, 14th, Brockwell Park Community Greenhouses will be starting a phased opening again to the general public, which obviously we are delighted about, but we also take those responsibilities very seriously. If you have registered as a volunteer for BPCG and you've done your induction and several sessions up to now, we're still operating using the volunteer sign-in spreadsheet. Only volunteers that have signed up in advance. We won't be doing running the drop-in, drop-out volunteering for a significant period still, but we have expanded the number of volunteer slots for all of those sessions, so there are more opportunities to volunteer, maintaining social distancing outside at the greenhouses. And yeah, from Sunday we are open again to the general public. This will be a phased opening. Most of the enclosed spaces in BPCG are obviously still closed. So the greenhouses, toilets and kitchen, all that sort of stuff are non-accessible, but we will be letting people in through the gates. Obviously, we'll be monitoring kind of how the general situation regarding COVID-19 develops and shifts over the next couple of weeks, and are prepared to. It's possible that we may have to close again, but the good news is, as of Sunday, we are kind of open. So we hope to see as many of you there as can manage it, and it would be great to see you on site. So let's get started straight away. I am delighted to welcome. Oh, man, sorry. Suddenly loads of people are joining this meeting. Why didn't I wait until 5 past? I should have waited until 7 minutes past. This happens every week. So let's get started with our special guest. I am delighted to welcome Alice Hunt. Alice works at Lambeth Palace Garden, so the domicile of the Archbishop of Canterbury when he's in London, and I think probably it must be one of the oldest gardens in the UK. I would think, right? Because it must be 11th or 12th century you got started. So Alice, maybe you could tell us a little bit first of all about how you wound up there.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. Brockwell Park Community Greenhouses definitely has a very, very dear place in my heart. So I was really, really grateful to be asked to come along to this session. So I was a volunteer with the greenhouses about 4 years ago for about a year. So I basically I decided that I wanted to become a gardener. I had pretty much zero experience of gardening, like very, very, very limited knowledge. And even although I had this very sort of like strikingly strong sort of feeling that I wanted to become a gardener, it did seem wise to me to spend a little bit of time testing out this plan before committing to it wholeheartedly. So I spent a year where I'd come to the greenhouses on a Friday and at the weekend as well, and I really, really kind of went for it. And I loved the place. It's such it's just such a wonderful, inclusive space to be. So I just love being there, and I benefited so much from just like a lot of generosity from Kat and Kate, but from all of the volunteers just sharing their knowledge with me. Just really, really openly, like such a lot of encouragement that I had from people there. So after about a year of just kind of volunteering with the greenhouses and doing my own research, learning as much as possible, I applied for an apprenticeship with Fulham Palace over in Putney. And I was really fortunate to get onto that apprenticeship scheme. So I spent 18 months working at Fulham Palace. I don't know if anybody here, I think Louise has been, I see Louise there, hello. So yeah, it looks like a few people have been. So Fulham Palace is it's a wonderful place. They've got a walled garden where lots and lots of vegetables, cut flowers are grown, and a big part of the apprenticeship there is growing fruit and veg, which was just really, really a pleasure. You get given a crop as well as an apprentice that's kind of your baby, so it's quite nice. Sort of, I got very attached to my brassicas in the time that I was an apprentice there. So I spent 18 months there. Then I spent about 8 months working at the Hurlingham Club over in the same kind of side of London. And then I saw a job advertised at Lambeth Palace. And Lambeth Palace is actually somewhere that I visited as an apprentice. And Nick, who's the head gardener there, gave me and the other apprentices a tour. And I just always remembered that tour, and always thought, gosh, if the opportunity ever comes up, I'd really love to work in this place. So yeah, like Joshua was saying, it is a place which has it has a very long history. So it's the garden has been there since 1197. It's the oldest garden in continuous cultivation in London. So it has got this amazing history, but I think the thing that for me, why I really wanted to work there is the approach that Nick has brought to gardening at Lambeth Palace. So he has been head gardener, I think, for about 4 or 5 years. And when he came in, he just turned the entire site into an organic site. So since Nick's been working there, there's been no pesticide use at all. And that was just so appealing to me, and I just found that very, very inspiring. And I felt really sort of impressed by him. I think that's been his approach for his whole career. Like prior to that, he worked for the National Trust, and he always had an organic approach in those gardens. So yeah, I think it's kind of the organic approach, and just like a real sort of a real approach to gardening on a site like Lambeth Palace, which is, let's make this an incredibly beautiful place. Let's, think about who's going to use it. So like there's lots and lots of visitors that come to Lambeth Palace. Obviously it's a home, so it's used by the Archbishop of Canterbury and his family. And then there's spiritual communities that live on site as well. So it's also, a place that people use for spiritual contemplation. But I think it's just exciting to me that you can make a big 10-acre site like that beautiful and work for lots of different people at the same time as making it work for wildlife, and taking a really kind of organic, considerate approach to how you look after the space.
I guess this question is going to, well, let's just ask it. How was that? I mean, how was that transition as someone that's kind of arrived to see through the aftermath of it? Has it led to a significant change in the way that you have to manage the space? Like, is going completely pesticide free and herbicide free, has that changed your sort of day to day, or has it really been a fairly smooth transition?
I think it's an interesting question, and I think it's probably something that somebody, like some of the volunteers who have, and maybe Nick himself has been through that transition, might be able to answer better than me, because so I've been working there. Well, it was 6 months at the start of lockdown, so I guess it would be about 9 months now that I've been in post.
As everyone at home frantically tries to calculate how long the circumstances have gone on.
But I guess the transition had already happened at the point at which I started. I think for me, I would say, just in terms of kind of what it means as a gardener, like I transitioned from working somewhere which wasn't an organic site and where we did use pesticides to somewhere where that wasn't required. And I think I can definitely speak about that it was like, it just makes such a massive difference, I think, to my sense of kind of what I'm doing. with my life, I suppose, and the meaning of that. I think I just feel much, much more now that my values are really aligned with kind of the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, and that makes a massive difference to me, I think, as a gardener. I think just in terms of wildlife at Lambeth Palace, it does really seem to be thriving. Like, we're always finding toads when we're cleaning leaves out. There does seem to be like thriving bird life. There's areas which are left with long grass throughout the summer. So, I mean, that's like sort of a haven for insects. I mean, I think there's work that we could do to kind of document that and to keep records of kind of how things change, because I suppose 4 years is it's kind of, I'm sure, like there's a marked difference over those 4 years, but I think probably over time it'll develop even more. So it'd be really interesting to see kind of what changes occur in the future in terms of what it means in terms of the wildlife in the garden.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because I mean, obviously, so much of what we're discovering about the negative effects of pesticide and herbicide usage has been so incredibly cumulative, right? Like when even people that grow exclusively at scale, right? Like they're not, they have no interest in collapsing their own natural environment. Like no one is doing, no one is using it out of maliciousness. It's, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, especially with insect population collapse, is stuff that's taken such a long time for those side effects to really truly manifest. And if stuff of that sort of serious nature had happened overnight, obviously we would have stopped using a lot of these chemicals, 10 or 15 years ago when a lot of them first came onto the market. So it will be truly interesting to see. I mean, obviously, repeat guests on Gardener's Question Time will have heard the discussion of Lambeth's bid to go completely pesticide and herbicide free. So there's been a lot of people signing petitions in that. So it looks like the sort of thing that could be happening sort of, as boroughs take an interest across London. And yeah, it'll be fascinating to see the kind of the long-term cumulative effects of that. Under normal circumstances, Lambeth Palace Garden is open to the public, right? At least one day a week. So people that haven't visited already can come down, but presumably not right now. Do you have any idea when you're going to be open again so that people can swing by, or?
Yeah, I've just noticed Robert here. I wasn't, because he's just turned his video on. So hello to Robert. So Robert and Louise, who are here, are both volunteers at Lambeth Palace. So really nice to see them. So usually the garden is open to the public once a month. I think it's first Friday of the month. Is that correct? Yeah. So first Friday of the month during the summer months, usually the garden is open to the public. I have to say I'm not sure when that might be starting up again. I mean, I'm not back at work yet. I hope to be as soon as possible. Very much miss working, but yeah, it's still unclear when we'll be returning to work. So it's really, really difficult to say at the moment. I think one thing which is just very, very positive and very encouraging is that during this period of lockdown, they have given keys to the garden to the staff at St Thomas's Hospital over the road. So that's just been so nice to know that the doctors and nurses and all the different people working at that hospital have been able to get a bit of respite and to use the grounds during this period when we're not there, that they've been using it. It's great.
That's wonderful. What have you been doing sort of on a horticultural perspective to stay busy in that case during this time? Do you have a garden at home?
I don't have a garden at home.
That's cool.
So I have pot plants, and I did everything I possibly could do with those pot plants. So everything got repotted. Everything's been getting a lot of attention. Yeah, I've been doing various projects from home. So I am working from home, and I've done some nice things. Like one of the projects that I worked on was to develop a tour for members of the public when we are reopened that just really, really focuses on the organic approach that we take, the kind of the greener way that we do things, and showing people that side of the garden. So a really kind of focused tour. We have these glades, which is a kind of a form of planting that Nick, the head gardener, has developed. So it's basically based on a meadow, but using perennial plants, which have a really, really long flowering season. So really, really good for pollinators. And it's basically something that's kind of been expanding throughout the garden. So there is a very, very large main lawn in the garden, but sort of gradually creeping into that lawn with these large beds of perennial plants that just obviously have more to offer than short grass. So most of those plantings are based on sort of a late flowering set of plants. So one of the things that I have also been looking at is, could we develop a set of plants for a spring flowering glade? So we balance that out and just really, really extend the season of flowering for the glades that we have in the garden.
I mean, that's, whether it's by coincidence or not, that's also a very prudent planting structure to have for kind of conditions now, right? Where it's self-sustaining, or at least to a certain extent. That sounds wonderful. And do you think that, I mean, I apologize for sounding like a bit of a broken record when it comes to COVID-19, but do you think that sort of once you are back at work full time and everything is kind of underway again, do you think that it will have any sort of any lingering effect, any changes on the way that the gardens are managed or run, or do you think it will be pretty much business as usual once this time has passed?
It's an interesting question. I guess it is. It's interesting to think about, just in terms of like you say, making things as self-sustaining as possible. I think that's definitely also been part of the approach over the last few years, is to really think about just in terms of kind of watering, like what can we do to limit the amount of water that we use, to make sure that areas are well mulched, and to grow plants that can survive during periods of drought. So I think that's already been very much part of what Nick's been thinking about, and some of the changes that there have been in the garden. But I suppose even more so, like we've had so there's communities that live on site, there's the Archbishop's family that live on site, and people have been really helping us out with kind of keeping things ticking over, keeping like the essential things watered, like some trees that we planted over the winter. But yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, who knows whether things like this will happen again, but it definitely seems like we're going to have summers like this again and again. So I think thinking about kind of sustainable planting, drought tolerant planting is just really, really essential at the moment.
I think you guys are probably, you folks at the gardens are perhaps a little bit ahead of the curve on that anyway, because I suspect it must have quite a significant microclimate. I know it's a 10-acre site. It's a reasonable size, especially for where it is in London. But your climate must be quite distinct just based on its location, right? So, I mean, have you been kind of adapting to that over the time that you've been there, or has this been sort of a known phenomenon for a really long time, and the stuff that you will find in Lambeth Palace Gardens is a little bit different from what you would find in surrounding places? Sorry, I garbled that question, but you see where I'm coming from, right? Tell us about your microclimate.
I think there is definitely a microclimate there, and it is possible to grow things there that would not survive outside of that microclimate, definitely outside of London and perhaps other places in London as well. I mean, there's things that flower, like salvias and stuff, flower in the garden until like November and December. It's kind of amazing. And so there's things like lemon trees and olive trees and things like that we have out in pots, just sort of out through the winter. So I think it definitely means that there's flexibility in terms of what we can grow there, and a little bit more leeway.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to to join us. So I think what we're going to do, we'll do. We have a couple of questions that people have submitted, so we'll take a look at those now, and then if you wouldn't mind, Alice, I'd like to come back to you once we've kind of done that, and if there are any. Let's see, I can see David here from the panel. If there are any panel guests or just guests who are here with us live today that would like to ask you some questions. So if you're watching at home and you've got something you would like to say, just have a think about that now. You can either drop it in the chat function and I will read it out for you, or when the time is right, please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask Alice your questions. But let's get on to the stuff that's been submitted for this week. So we have a question from Robert, who is asking us about chili plants. I grew some chili plants from chilies, the seeds themselves, and have some questions. The first one is, I don't suppose you can identify the chilies themselves. I'm going to come back to that, Robert. I'm keeping them warm, but what sort of feed should I be giving them? Seaweed, tomato, nettle juice? And I'm treasuring what growth I'm getting, though. Should I pinch out the growing tip? I'm also allowed to dry out between watering. Obviously, it's a question about chili plants indoors, so I went straight to Doug. So this stuff is right from the horse's mouth. I'm just going to read it out loud, Robert, rather than filtering it through my own slightly less credible advice. Doug says you're doing all the right things, Robert. So hopefully that's a weight off your mind. He says don't use tomato feed until the flowers appear. Obviously, it'll be a high potassium feed, I would assume. So its main purpose is, is promoting the flower buds and fruit formation. So wait until the flowers appear. Pinch the growing tip out when the plant is 12 to 18 inches high. So that's about 30 to 45 centimeters. Although it's not the same for all varieties. Bear with me just a moment. There was a photo supplied. But I don't think, unfortunately, I'm not sure either Doug nor I could identify the type from. You may have to wait until the plant starts fruiting, I'm afraid, Robert, to identify it. Doug also points out that chilies do better in a free draining soil, so watering when they're dry is the best way of promoting flower growth. Another good point is that if the seedling is too small and it's planted in too much soil, then the roots won't be able to take up all that moisture. So the soil will stay damp, and that will just cause the roots to rot as they struggle to respire. And that can inhibit above soil growth as well, which makes the air around the plant damp. This is called dampening off, and this is a lot of the time. This is where you start to notice your indoor. A lot of your aphids and stuff like that. The stuff where you grow chili plants, you think they're not even that close to the window. I don't understand how I've managed to get a pest on these completely clean plants again. But a lot of the time it's because if you're watering them too much, it just makes the area just above the soil too humid. And keeping that soil damp, that's where things like black fly and stuff like that, that's where a lot of their eggs will incubate. If you can, I would suggest watering from below, if at all possible, if you've got nice free draining soil. If they're still in really sort of small pots, just get another pot the same size. Get a couple of pebbles or just any sort of anything that's rigid, because you're just trying to create a couple of centimeters of space between the pot that you've got your chilies in and the pot of the same size that you are going to be putting water into, and then you can just lift that one out, pour some water in, put that plant back down gently so that you don't spray water up all over the sides and then all over your kitchen table, which I do almost with 100% regularity. But watering it from the bottom is especially good for chilies, because obviously that will encourage root growth and stuff anyway, but it keeps the top layer of soil quite dry, and that can do a really good job of discouraging a lot of the predators that you'll find will somehow manage to find chili plants even indoors. When that top level of soil is super dry, then their eggs don't have a good space to incubate and they will slowly die off. It stops being possible once they get above a certain size. Eventually, when your chili plant is enormous, you can't hoik it out of the pot to water underneath for every time, but do exactly as you're doing now. Let the soil thoroughly dry out. So it's not little and often, it's the opposite. It's a good old dunking when the soil has had time to completely dry. Our next question is from Kristen Stott. I can see you, Kristen. Hi there. I guess it's about trees. It is about trees. We have mulched our fruit trees with well-rotted manure. Some of them have quite a bit of grass growing quite close to them. Is it possible to dig the grass out with a fork, or might that damage the tree roots? So, I mean, it's certainly possible to dig the grass out. When you say that there's grass going quite close to it, are we talking turf here, Christian? Are we talking like well-established grass that's, quite thick in the soil that you want to remove? Or is it that the grass itself is kind of creeping into the mulched area and has started to germinate very close to the tree? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I know you've seen our trees, Joshua,
Yes.
on our community orchard in Brixton Hill. We have a metre square area around each fruit and nut tree with a fence around it, and we've just put well-rotted manure into that square now because we've decided that they've been too dry, and that's why we've had a lot of aphid problems. And but we've got quite long grass growing around the outside of the fence. Now it's starting to sort of move into the square, the protected square around the trees, so that we've got quite long grass growing inside the square. And we know we're supposed to weed that area. And this is, since the update on our whole orchard is that we have 14 fruit and nut trees. The oldest one is 5 years planted, and the youngest one is only a year and a half. And we've now managed to find 14 members of the community to allocate each tree to one person.
Oh, excellent.
And the neighbour who now has our very damaged greengage tree sent me this question on email saying, my greengage tree has very long grass growing inside the boundary of the fence. Right. Can I dig it out with a fork? Or will that, how shallow, she wants to know, are the roots of her greengage, which has been planted for 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, so it's I would say it's unlikely that you're going to run into too many problems, but obviously this is always going to be a question of sort of how careful and how methodical are you going to be. Like, would I recommend getting a full-size fork, the kind that you'd stick your foot on, and doing it that way? No, I definitely wouldn't. No. I suspect the difficulty is going to be because those areas are fenced off, you can't, leaning over them and stuff is going to be quite tough. So the best thing you can do, my suggestion would be, is try and remove some of that grass, because of the way grass essentially reproduces. It's not just from seed. They will have, let me see, is it stolonous growth? So basically grass spreads out in and of itself, right? The plant reproduces by extending outwards, not just by reproducing from seed. So you will have to, the simplest thing you can do is cut that back away from the mulched area. Otherwise you are going to get that grass that's on the outside is going to creep inside, because it's not making any distinction between, where's an area it can go and where is it not allowed. In terms of actually weeding the stuff that's inside the mulched area, I would recommend, as much as it's a Herculean task and one that will last a lifetime, is weed it with a hand fork or by hand as much as you can. If you were to create a new mulched area around a tree, perhaps a slightly more mature tree, there is actually a method for doing that, and that is you cover the grass itself with some sort of permeable membrane. Newspaper used to be like black and white newspaper used to be the recommended source. Cover that with like a good few sheets, so there's a significant barrier. Chuck your mulch on the top, and the mulch and the newspaper together is enough to completely cut out the light, which obviously will eventually kill the grass on its own. The grass will just rot down, the newspaper will just rot down, and then you just have mulch in that area. Especially for immature trees, the thing that you have to worry about is you don't want to be mulching too high up to the trunk. You don't want to be burying the bottom part of the trunk in anything that's going to, anything especially that's going to soak up a lot of moisture and retain that moisture, because then you're going to, not only is that going to be a real nice place for pests to potentially breed, but you also run the risk of rotting sort of around the trunk as the root flare kind of comes up together. So it is, you do have to sort of manage, you know, what's the level of your mulch compared to what's the height of your tree. But I would say, yeah, if you can get a mower out there, then yeah, okay, fine. Okay, perhaps not. In which case, I would just suggest just using a sharp-edged spade to just dig the turf out and remove it away from the mulched area. Otherwise, it's just going to be, wait, is it a Sisyphean task? Wait, which one of those guys ended up in Greek hell rolling the boulder up the hill? It's going to be one of those, right, where it's going to keep coming back, especially at this time of year where we keep getting these big downbursts of rain like we've had today, and then the rest of the time pretty much, you know, unbroken sunshine. When the grass gets the conditions to spread, it will do it very quickly. So if you're not pulling it back, but then for the actual mulch, hand or with a hand fork, I would suggest.
Okay, so just would you recommend, because I've been keeping the long grass around the outside of the fence because it looks pretty, having sort of an area of long grass just growing around the outside of the fence. But maybe you're saying maybe cut the grass down outside.
It's entirely up to you, and obviously it depends how much work you. I mean, for a start, it depends like how significant is this grass growing through in the mulched areas, and is that really becoming a significant problem? But because I would recommend, especially on the younger trees, not getting in there with a full fork and digging it out that way. I would recommend, you know, being as gentle as you possibly can, using a hand fork and teasing it out. That is basically a job for life, right? So if you are fine with that, and the people that have elected to look after a tree themselves are fine with that, then yeah, just weed it out by hand and just stay on top of it. It's not a huge, you know, it isn't going to be a really, really significant problem. By weeding that out specifically for grass, you will also keep on top of, you know, other weeds and keeping that mulched area clear. That's great because you're lessening vectors for things like diseases, for things like aphids. Like, they will live in those plants and they will be transported there, you know, with those weeds to the trees as well. So that, you know, in terms of general hygiene, that is also a benefit. As to the grass kind of around the area, if it does look nice, then great. It looks, you know what I mean? Like, it looks nice. It's really a case of, yes, that grass by stolonous reproduction is going to creep out into the mulched area if you keep it there. That may not be that much of an issue, right? Like, it's not the end of the world if it does that, as long as you are diligent with picking it out. But yeah, it's going to keep doing that unless you cut it back.
Okay, thanks.
In the mulched area. So that's everything that we have for questions that have been asked of the panel. So I thought what we would do next is we'll just open it up to everyone that is watching live. And if you have any questions for Alice about Lambeth Palace Gardens or the journey that took her there, now is the time to ask them. You will note that you came into the meeting on mute, so just unmute yourself if you have any questions that you'd like to ask. Now we'll do that really awkward thing where I ask and everyone's like, should it be me? Should I say anything? So yeah, so if you have a question, then just jump right in.
Hi Alice, I've got a question. I too am similar to sort of how you started off. I don't work in anything related to gardening, but I am really sort of interested in possibly maybe not pursuing a full-time career, but maybe at least sort of some kind of part-time career. And I was wondering, because obviously we've got quite a lot of time to study and read, and I just wondered if there was anything that you could recommend that might be useful, whether is it kind of embarking on an RHS2, or is it, you know, can you find other means just by reading, or any other resources that would be seen as kind of a good way of learning, and also something that other people in the gardening world may view as also a useful asset?
Hi, Amy. Yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say a few things. So I think that the RHS level 2 qualification is a really good thing. So I did that as part of my apprenticeship. So when I was at Fulham Palace, we had day release and we went off to Cape Mala College in Regent's Park and studied for the RHS level 2. I think it is a really useful qualification to have, and it seems like for many jobs that's something that they look for. So I think you can do those courses online. So it is something that you could look into, or I think there is something also invaluable about kind of being in a classroom with other people. So maybe when that's possible in the future as well, it could be something to think about. I guess the other thing that I would say though is maybe just to also just follow your interest. So if there's something that's really exciting to you about horticulture or about gardening, whether it's kind of like vegetables or exotic plants or cacti or whatever it is, just really follow that interest, because I think it's what you get excited about and that you're really responding to that's going to kind of sustain you. So make sure that you follow that, because the RHS course is it is a good thing. It's really essential. Parts of it are really dry, so I think it's probably good to balance the dryness of some of the course if you decide to go down that route with the excitement of other things. During this lockdown time, I did a little permaculture course online, because that was just something that I just was getting really interested in, and it was just, I think it's really nice to be able to pursue those lines of interest, and also where possible to do that with other people who are enthusiastic about it as well, because I think it's just it's good to be able to share what you're interested in with other people. And on that course we could kind of just have little groups together and chat about it and explore ideas. Yeah, but I wish you luck. It's a very rewarding career path, I would say. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Amy. Yeah, so does anyone else have any questions for us, or just anything that they would like to kind of to add to the discussion at this stage? Kristen, I can see you raising your hand. Please go for it.
Just, you were talking about in Brockwell Park greenhouses and at Lambeth Palace, Alice and Joshua, that you are working on trying to find plants that you can grow that don't need watering. And I wondered if you'd been to Beth Chatto's garden in Essex, where she died sadly a couple of years ago now, but where the people are carrying on her work, and where she started a garden that has never been watered. So she has this lovely wide area as you go into the entrance of her gardens, which you can go into without paying to go and tour the rest of the gardens. So you can go there every time, which we used to go to the cafe and just walk around the dry garden. And she's got a fantastic array of plants there, which have all survived without being watered ever since, I don't know how many years it is now, but it's just a nice, interesting place to go and look if you're interested in dry gardens. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I mean,
Thanks.
it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing that it's never been watered. I've never been to Beth Chatto's garden. I would love to. There is actually so at Lambeth Palace we have the dual border, and I believe that was actually designed by Beth Chatto. So it's got all of the sorts of plants that she was really kind of interested in, all these plants that thrive in dry conditions. It's quite a narrow little gravelled border, but it's a really lovely thing. And when I was doing my my research recently for kind of plants for a spring flowering glade, I spent quite a lot of time on the Beth Chatto website, because it's such an amazing resource, and really helpfully categorized as well. There you can just sort of filter by plants that are kind of drought tolerant. It's amazing. But yeah, she seemed like an incredible woman, and I'd love to visit that garden.
We've had our interest in Beth Chatto's garden because my mother-in-law when she was alive, used to live near there, so we used to take her for coffee there. But it's been revived in the lockdown because it's been quite hard to get plants for our garden, and of course we're busy with our own garden now. We can't go out anywhere, so she's been doing a lot of online ordering and delivering. They do an overnight delivery, so the plants get to be carried in not too warm conditions, and they arrive on your doorstep early in the morning, so they're nice and cool and they're well wrapped in newspaper. And we've had quite a lot of plants from there in this period of lockdown, because and they're very good, healthy, quality plants, and well wrapped and well transported. So just if anyone's looking for somewhere to get plants from, she's got an amazing selection. Anyway, that's the end of that.
Amazing. I think at BPCG, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but we're lucky that we have a very diligent sort of core volunteer group that are there for watering, sometimes twice a day over the last, I don't know, I mean, however long this incredibly dry spring has been going on at this point, probably 10, I mean, obviously it's raining today, but nearly 10 weeks we've had an unprecedentedly low amount of precipitation. At BPCG, a lot of what we do at the moment is to do with water recovery, as opposed to, obviously, because a lot of the food growing crops that we have, a lot of them are quite thirsty, and there's not really much that we can do to get around that. But the lower greenhouse renovation that is almost coming to an end, I was there on Friday, and the place looks pretty spick and span in there, actually. We've significantly upped the water recovery, sort of the rainfall footprint for that building. All the surrounding areas. We've taken an opportunity while we've been renovating the upper greenhouse and moving on to the next phase of that project, which is going to be reglazing, to increase the water recovery of that place's footprint as well. And if you've been to the site, you'll notice things like the green roof on top of the office and stuff, which is just a way of trying to trap water in our environment. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're going to be continuing to experiment with over the next couple of years. And that, I mean, it's very much part of our remit anyway, but I think, I mean, if you were skeptic on it before, I can't imagine that you can maintain it now. The cat is very much out of the bag on this whole global warming thing, right? This is like the third spring and summer in a row where it's been extremely dry after, a very wet period in winter. So we are going to have to start, just from a purely mechanical perspective, looking about how we lower our water footprint, or how we retain more in our environment. Is there anyone else that would like to ask Alice or myself or anyone else that's here a question? Anything else they would like to contribute? Otherwise, we will start kind of winding down. Robert, hi. Sorry, I had you on mute. I can ask you to unmute, but I can't do it myself. So.
Okay. Hello, Alice. Really lovely to see you.
You too.
And thank you, Joshua, for the information about the chilies. My question is on a completely different matter. And a friend gave me some white radish, the daikon, I think you say. Is that how you pronounce it? They gave me some plants about 3 weeks ago, and they've all bolted. Now, is this because it's too early in the season? I've never grown them before. They've all bolted. Do I try and get the seeds from them and plant them a bit later in the season? What are my options? They're obviously not going to fruit now, are they? Or fruit, is that the right word? They're not going to produce radishes, but
no. And I think the ones that you do get, I think I think
all of them are bolted.
Right. Okay. Fine. I was going to say, because I think it also has an effect on the flavour, even of the flowers and stuff. If you were going to eat those, it makes them quite, I don't know, gross, basically bitter.
Yep.
So I mean, I guess it's. What I was going to say is, normally you would say, oh, they've been planted too late, and they've been put under too much water stress. That sounds very accusatory, right? Like, how on earth could you not, in this season that we've just had, how on earth could you not plant it too late when it's been, unbroken sunshine since about March and it's barely rained at all? So of course they've been under water stress. So I think this is probably a side effect of the conditions that we are having. You should be able to plant them again in autumn, right? Like you can go through that life cycle again. So so my suggestion would be, tcollect the seeds. And try it again when it's a little bit cooler, and
okay.
Take that time in the middle to really think through your options in terms of what's the local climate like, what are your conditions, and then have another whack around the same sort of time that you would be, planting onions and garlic, or I think, or maybe even earlier than that. And yeah, have another try. And then next year, yeah, I guess I mean, the challenge that anyone that's trying to grow anything at all at this time of year, a little bit earlier in this country, is now facing is, I know that the conditions are changing, and they're changing every year. I know that it gets warmer much earlier, that it stays warmer and stays drier, but a last frost will still kill all my plants stone dead in the same way that's been true for, countless generations. So unfortunately, it becomes more and more of a gamble, right? Where you're planting stuff like this, you have to plant it earlier. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation like this, where unless you're out there watering it with huge amounts every single day, they are going to bolt. And that's going to be the same for all sorts of alliums, right? Like even just, trying to grow your average, onions in the garden. They're going to need to get started earlier. They're going to need a lot more water. Otherwise, you're going to have exactly the same problem. But a lot of, semi-tender or, semi-hardy or perennial plants are going to suffer in a frost, which could happen at any time. So unfortunately, we are in this kind of limbo period where we know conditions are changing, but we can't really bank on, a different mode of planting these things. So unfortunately, Robert, I think it's the conditions that have done you dirty. So give it another go in autumn, and then try again next year. But I would say probably start them off indoors, and then get them outside as soon as you feel confident in making that gamble that the frost isn't going to come back. And start them earlier. It'll be worth it. They're really nice. Okay.
And just one more point. You asked it before about Lambeth Palace being open to visitors. Before Alice started last year, we had a visit from Brockwell Park community greenhouses from the volunteers. There was about 20 of the group came to Lambeth Palace, and Nick's really, really encouraging. Nick, the head gardener, it really encourages groups, particularly within Lambeth, to come visit Lambeth Palace. So I'm sure that, Alice, we can organise more groups from Brockwell Park community greenhouses to come and do your tours, your wonderful...
That'd
be great.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So that reminds me of something, Robert, that I should probably mention. So I know Incredible Edibles Lambeth, and there's a few other community groups. I don't have the full details yet, but they will go out in our volunteer emails, and they will be on maybe a forthcoming episode of Gardener's Question Time, are doing a kind of via Zoom, are doing kind of virtual tours of various gardens while they're in kind of this weird limbo position that both BPCG and Lambeth Palace Gardens are in, where horticulturists there will be creating these kind of short videos that are basically kind of walk-arounds of the sites, and then we'll be showing those off, and then there'll be a Zoom sort of session afterwards where everyone watches the same video, and then they can kind of put questions to the people that are there. So for the time being, there hopefully will be a forthcoming way of doing what you just described, but from the comfort of your own home. And I think that also relates really a lot to the question that Amy asked about if you're thinking of a career transition and sort of what you can be doing in the meantime. Once you are allowed to do that, obviously, the thing that I would most recommend is go and see local gardens, especially entities like ours, like things that have a community, not necessarily a focus, but are open to the community as well. Although obviously there are some beautiful, fantastic private gardens out there. Go to places like that, because the diversity of experience that you will find there may help you, may clarify what it is that you are really, really interested in. But you will also see tons of stuff that you never even considered, I guarantee. There are so many fantastic sort of community enterprises just in South London alone. So you could easily do, you could visit one on a weekend for, the back end of the year. And that will probably be a really clarifying space. If you look in the chat, Alice has just actually posted a little film about Lambeth Palace Gardens. I would suggest that you make a note of that link now, because obviously once this meeting over and you've all been chucked out into the ether, we will lose that. But obviously this video will be uploaded to the BPCG YouTube channel and will be on the website as well. So I will link the video that Alice has linked in the description of both of those. Oh, I've actually just we've received another message from Casper. I've been working on the new Lambeth Palace Library Garden with bowls and wire. Horticultural agency like Fresh Horticultural Careers is a good way to find work if you need to do it. Yeah, so that is a really great point. There are not loads, but a couple of very well established horticultural recruitment agencies, which is a really straightforward and good way of finding work. I suspect as well that, I mean, we talk about this every week. Mother Nature does not care that we are all stuck inside, right? Like the world goes on outside, regardless and without us. It will be very interesting to see what the sort of post-lockdown life is like in terms of just opportunities in general. But I suspect in horticulture, new opportunities potentially abound, because this is, maybe a transformative period, not just because the way we live our lives has been significantly changed, but also because we are going to have to be a little bit more prepared, not necessarily for events like this, but like just, it would be prudent to make some changes in the way we do things. And I suspect that will lead to new things going on in horticulture. So even if you haven't decided what you want to do yet, if you are thinking about a career change, that might be great, because the thing that turns out really speaks to you and is what you really want to do for the rest of your life might just be being invented literally right now, in the next couple of months, who knows. So I definitely think it is worth, once the lockdown is over, getting out to local gardens, taking the opportunities of those tours and stuff like that, and just seeing what's out there. And I've got one last question before we go, and this is something that I think everybody here can contribute to. I've got a question from Angie. What barrier cream would you recommend to stop my hands getting dry and dirty? I'm sure people here are going to have an opinion on what you can put on your hands as a gardener to stop them getting all manky and tough. Have at it, Zoom channel, right? Just unmute yourselves and go for it, because I'm a dude and I do that rubbish dude thing where I think it's a problem for another time and I just let my hands get gross and rubbish. So I don't have a strong opinion on this, I'm afraid, but I'm sure someone else does.
No.
Go for it, Kristen. Get stuck in.
Number one, I have the most gorgeous gloves. They're white leather gloves by Briars, Briers. You can get them in Croxted Road Garden Centre, or probably lots of garden centres, or online from safetygloves.co.uk. They're not very expensive and they're really comfortable to wear. I use those most of the time because my hands do get cracked and dry and sore. And then when my hands do get cracked and dry and sore because I've forgotten to wear my gloves or I've washed them too many times, which we are at the moment, I use a Trixo regenerating hand cream, and nothing else works. A Trixo regenerating hand cream, you have to search online because everywhere sells out of it really quickly. Boots and Sainsbury's and everywhere seems to keep selling out of it. So keep searching online until you can find someone that's selling it. It costs about £4.50 up to £6 a tube, but it's brilliant.
My only advice on the subject would be to really think about your nail brush. This is the other thing that I'd recommend, because if you can find one that really fits the shape of your fingers, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but like not everyone's fingertips are on exactly the same angle. There's always get one of the ones that's got like loads of different angles of brush pointing off in loads of different directions. Because I find if you can clean off your fingernails and cuticles quite gently without having to scrub with loads of hot water and stuff, that actually does a really good job of preventing a lot of the side effects. If you can keep it gentle around that area, you can wash the rest of your hands maybe just once without having to, using steaming hot water, and that helps a lot. Unless anyone has a last minute lotion or potion for dealing with dry hands, we are going to draw this episode of BPCG Gardener's Question Time to a close. Thank you so much, Alice, for joining us this afternoon. It's been wonderful to have you, and thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone else that's joined the panel and joined the group for this afternoon. We hope to see you again next week. Next week, I really hope Nat maybe is going to be joining us. I'm kind of just in the process of sorting it out with her now. She is from Hackney Herbal. I don't know if you know the business in North London, who use herbs for all sorts of interesting stuff. I would really recommend, in the meantime, head to their website, and have a look at the stuff that they've got going on there. I'm really looking forward to talking to her. I think it'll be maybe a little bit different from what we normally do at Gardener's Question Time, but it will also hopefully be full of interesting stuff that people can try at home, new and interesting things to do with herbs while we're all kind of stuck inside. So yeah, some new stuff to experiment with. So yeah, join us next week for that. This will be up on the YouTube channel as soon as I am able. And that's it. Thank you very much from me. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your Saturday afternoon, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. All right. Enjoy this recording.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, Alice. Really love it.
Bye, Robert. Nice to see you.